I'm good.
I'll go ahead and start. So I'm currently streaming my game right now, and so the first thing I kind of wanted to cover is just what the UI looks like as far as a healer. Are any of you guys online right now? Let's see.
Yep.
So why? There it is.
It's in there.
So the first thing that if you'll notice, just stay right there. Is if with my frames, I have something that tells me when you're out of range versus in range. Um, and that's something nice that Voodoo has built in. I previously did not have that. I used to use, I'll show you. I used to use X Pearl, right? So it's something like this. It doesn't tell me if I'm out of range, so I'm sitting here casting, and without hearing the voiceover or the out of range sign, I wouldn't know that I'm out of range, right? Because the majority of the time I spend, I would say I'd spend um, about 50% of my time I'm looking at frames. And so that just removes one more barrier when it comes to UI. So UI is probably the easiest place to start as far as healing goes, because there can be a lot of useful information. The first time I used Voodoo, it was extremely overwhelming, and in fact, actually didn't use Voodoo from Classic or some from Retail Vanilla all the way through Wrath of the Lich King. I never used Voodoo. I always did X Pearl. Um, which is fine because X Pearl told me if I had hots on a player and stuff like that, but Voodoo's actually a lot more helpful because it tells me if someone's out of range. It tells me if I hover over them which direction they are. So if you look right here, it has a right arrow. So if I move right, look, I'm in range of Mars. Or if I move back over here and I'm hovering, it tells me to go like straight to the left. It's extremely helpful. um, Another thing that's extremely useful is with Voodoo is if I toss on a hot, as it gets lower on the countdown, it tells me that the countdown's getting lower. So it's something to kind of keep me aware of. This is particularly useful for priests and druids, especially because it's important for those two classes to kind of um, keep the hots rolling. So I know as soon as it gets down to as soon as it gets down to like 0, I need to reapply the hot. So, like right now, I can see it's counting down. It's about 1.5 seconds ahead on Mars. So I can like do a heal right here, and then like instantly move my mouse into position and heal. Um, so I mean, for you Mars, it doesn't really matter too much. Same thing, Zorak. Since you guys don't have hots, it's not as big of a deal. Um, but for priests and druids, it becomes very important to have those countdown timers, so you don't have to kind of like figure it out. In the past, the way I played it was I just kind of got used to like internally counting in my head, but this kind of removes that whole factor of like if you're like a second, half a second off. Plus, it visually tells you where it is. So I do highly recommend looking into some sort of raid frames because it is important, or not important, but it makes it easier. It takes away some of the guessing. So same thing, I can hit my shield. I know there's a shield. I can toss on my hot, and it'll eventually give me cooldowns as they get lower. Um, Another thing that I like, and let me fly to, or let me run somewhere. About a lot of raid frames. So both X Pearl and Voodoo does this. Is it tells me if someone is being healed. Let's start. Um, so if I'm here, if you look at my raid frames and I start healing, you can see that there's a little gray outline. It tells me that someone is healing that target in particular. So sorry, I'm responding, Lorca. Um, so let's see. If I go to Mars, I can see how much incoming heal is coming on, right? So if I'm using flash heal, I can see it just shows like a little small amount. If I use a greater heal, it's a bigger amount. If I toss a hot on him, some hots, not all, but some hots will show when it ticks. This renew in particular does not show. But it makes it really convenient. So I can see Mars actually healing him, like trying to heal himself. So that becomes important for like, let's say there's an oh shit moment, right? And if I see like healing going on to Mars, and let's say Mars is tanking, if I can already see like a full bar going back onto him, that means I don't need to heal him. I don't need to oh shit heal him. So I'm not overlapping on heals with someone else, because that means someone else. That means my heals gonna get wasted, or someone else's heals are gonna get wasted. Um, so it's something to kind of keep in mind. That the UI gives you a lot of information, so it really is helpful if you install some sort of raid UI that allows you to get this information.
Have you tried Healbot?
Not since retail. Um, I used it a little bit in retail, but I personally didn't like it, and I used grid as well, and I also did not like that. I don't know why. I can't remember why. I just remember I didn't like the visual look of it. TiVo was the one that really got me onto using Voodoo, because she kind of helped me configure it. I didn't make too many adjustments, so my Voodoo's pretty similar to how it normally is, but Tiva's like the Voodoo guru in the guild. Before that, I used X Pearl, so I can show you what it would look like in raid. So if I go show raid, let me. One thing I hate about Voodoo is it's a huge pain in the butt to move. So X Pearl does something a little bit different, where it tells me how many of my own dots are on the person. It doesn't tell me what other dots are on the person, but it will tell me if someone's getting incoming heal. The nice thing about X Pearl is it's very clean. Right? Like there's not too much to look at. It still tells me that there's an incoming heal coming in. Both Voodoo and you can see it, both Voodoo and X Pearl do it. So that's just like, when I'm in a raid, that's just like I know someone's healing that person. I don't need to like waste my time healing that person. Or if there is big upcoming raid damage, maybe I need to figure out, I need to overlap heals, because something big's happening. Like if I know Stomp's coming out in Brutalis, right? Even though like I can seal someone pre-healing, that may be an indicator of I should still be healing it, right? Because if I see like the bar not quite topping off the tank, then I would cast a heal on that as well. So it kind of gives you a lot of information. The other thing too with using raid frames is I highly recommend using some sort of raid frame that either has a built-in mouse over macro for you, or that you use all built over macros. So if you look at my bars down below, you'll notice that almost everything I have is a macro. Very few are actual clickable skill sets. And so the reason being is if I use like a regular renew, so like let's say I go in here and let's say I grab a renew in here, right? If I want to heal Mars, I can't just, whoops. If I want to heal Mars, if I hover over him, I actually end up healing myself. Because by default, the way WoW works is if you don't have a target, you heal yourself. So if I'm using Flash Heal, if you notice my Flash Heal down here is a mouse over macro. So that means I can hover over his bar and heal, and it'll heal him. So that means I don't even have him targeted, and I can still heal him technically. If I have him targeted, it doesn't work. You can adjust the macro so that it does work, but I personally don't like that. The other thing too is I can also hover over his character and heal him as well. So I could either choose to heal over a raid frame, or I can choose to heal over his actual target. A little bit more useful in PvP if you're having friendly nameplates turned on to heal, but this is where it becomes actually more important for shamans, right? Which, because the way chain heal functions, chain heal is going to bounce off targets, right? It's not like, why can I toss that? Can I not toss this here? Okay. I'm gonna move somewhere outside. But because the way chain heal functions, sometimes having the unit frames up is actually super useful, because rather than looking at like your entire raid frame over here on the left to see who's missing HP, you can actually visually see in front of you who needs heals. So we're out here. I think I need to be a little bit further out. Appreciate you coming with me, Mars. It's super helpful. Still can't use that here. Alright, here we go. So I've got these white flares here.
It's still recharging.
Let's say these white flares are 2 other people next to Mars. If I'm a shaman, like these people could be in all different groups, right? Mars could be in group 1. This first flare in the middle could be like in group 5, and this last flare closest to me could be like in group 3, right? So if I'm looking at raid frames, it may not tell me that my healing is going to chain between those 3 if I target any one of those 3. So on specific fights where there's a lot of raid healing, especially for shamans who are maybe doing a lot of raid healing, it becomes a lot more useful. So like KJ is very useful because everyone's spread out. The group numbers don't necessarily coordinate with like being next to their group members. So then I see Mars's health right here. I see the first flare, so I see that person, and then I see the closest flare. That tells me if I chain heal like either Mars in the front or this person in the back, I can just hover over them, chain heal, and it'll hit all 3 targets. Unless there's other targets elsewhere that are also missing, and it kind of messes up the balance. But
can you confirm that actually works in a raid?
Like right now? Or
right, well, because when I've played with some friendly nameplates, but when you enter an instance, they all turn off. You can't actually, as far as I'm aware, I haven't looked for add-ons.
It works with default. It works with default.
Yeah,
like you don't even need an add-on for it. Like it works with regular friendly nameplates.
But not when you're inside an instance. Yeah, they all turn off.
I believe he's right.
No, I don't think. I think WoW turns them off, and there's no option to turn them back on.
We can go inside an instance real quick.
I was gonna say I've never tried it that hard before, like I said, but as far as I'm aware,
I've definitely
healed
nameplates inside instances. So maybe it is the add-on then. But yeah, I definitely heal Supremus that way. Because I don't like playing the guessing game of where everyone is, and I try to optimize my chains as much as possible.
Yeah, that would be super helpful for like chain healing and stuff like that.
Sorry, I don't have an epic flyer on this. Actually, you know what? I have an epic flyer on my shaman. I'll just switch over to that. Before I forget, though, let me turn off my raid frames. Actually, can you leave group Mars and I'll re-invite you? Perfect. We can go.
And mana tombs.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll see the same thing with my shamans. I have all my heals are mouse over macros and not actually click target. Again, it comes to personal preference. I personally think it's faster to do mouse over because it removes the step of actually clicking someone. Some people get a little bit nervous with it because they're afraid they're actually going to hover over a different frame than they mean to. But you can also create stop cast macros for that if you're overly concerned with it. I don't know why my bandage is on here. So we're flying out. Mana Tombs is north, right? It's been like really long time since I've been inside one.
No one ever does heroic Mana Tombs.
Yeah, it's not too much reason to do it.
Just the enhanced totem, basically, and there's a shield.
Totem. You get the whatchamacallit now. The badge one.
Yep.
See, it pulls up the default in a raid. It pulls up the default.
Interesting.
That's how I know what I'm looking at. Oh, okay.
That spell isn't ready yet.
Okay, I swear I've tried to turn them on because I like to see those as well, but they are just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
I'll have to look
only
into
like
it a
to
little
see
bit
it on
then.
my shaman and only in certain fights. Otherwise, it's too much information for me to see to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of
So the nice
clutter.
thing about Voodoo 2 is it tells me how many stacks of Earth's Shield is still remaining on Mars. Because if you notice, my buffs up here are like really tiny, right? So I do need to get a weak aura. There is a weak aura for I think range on totems and stuff like that, but I actually haven't looked into it. But yeah, other than that, it allows me to see if I can chain heal across multiple people without actually having to look at my raid frames. That's something to consider. So that kind of covers, I guess, the UI portion of what I wanted to go over. So the next kind of portion that I want to kind of cover is like prioing targets. So the first thing being is like obviously, you know, a lot of especially in progression, there's usually raid assignments, and raid assignments is really good because it creates structure, but it shouldn't be the end all for like how you heal, because there are moments of when you can make adjustments. So first of all, like let's say as a shaman, majority of your raid healing is probably going to be off the main tank. But then there are certain instances where, like especially in Sunwell, where there are plenty of shaman not healing the main tank. So for example, in Twins, right, the way that I believe both ETYG and Roughnecks has it set up is that there's at least one shaman on caster healing, right? And so that shaman will be primarily focusing on whatever the caster group's doing up top on Twins. However, in Muru, we split the shaman, one shaman per ad tank. So with that being said, like there are moments when you can kind of cheat. So like for example, in let me pull it up. I have a video, so let me bring it up. I'm gonna change my stream window. So you guys should be able to see YouTube, right? Okay, so let me
Yeah.
go to let me wait for actually right here is a good spot, right? So right now no ads are up in the fight, right? We have 37 seconds on the ad and 29 seconds on the next void. So what this kind of means is for shaman is you can kind of flex into making your own decision on where you want to heal. Something to keep in mind is that, you know, your chain heals is stuck in the same area. So like if I were to be looking currently at what I see at the raid frames as a shaman, I would be looking at healing ranged. The nice thing is our groups are kind of set up that 3, 4, and 5 are all ranged, and then, you know, there's usually 2 hunters in group 2. So it kind of makes it easy on my eyes to kind of track where everything is. But if I'm looking over here, I notice that there's a lot of people that have more missing health than in group 1 and 2. I also know that the way that priests function is when priests tend to see something like group 4 right here, where 4 of the people are missing health, that priest will most likely circle of healing that. So as a shaman, rather than focus on healing group 4, I would focus on healing either Inflate in group 3, Franken, or Tiva in group 5. And right now we can even see Tiva having an income heal. But that would be my prior targets, is because I know that's going to be make the most effective use of my chain healing. Is all the people that are in this range group, because group 2 doesn't have that much damage going on. Now when the ads come in, then you'll have your assignments are kind of the responsibility of you're individually responsible for keeping up each tank, and that's when you wouldn't cheat off, right? So for us, Duckhorn heals Tiva, Blase heals Sagi, and Prof heals I believe Smixy. So and then the priest free range, Lorca kind of pumps into Smixy as well, I believe, when the void comes out. But that's kind of when you would when you don't want to cheat, right? Another good fight would be Brutalis is another good example.
Let me actually restart. I was late.
Yeah.
Now you can watch the
I am
video.
actually recording this. So so Brutalis is
that's
a pretty good fight, because there's a lot of room to make adjustments as a healer. For basically all classes. So for paladins, you kind of have to worry about the tank taunting. So you kind of have to be like right on the ball on that, which is why it's so important that tanks communicate with healers on when the taunt goes out. Same thing with the stomp, because it kind of allows you to know when to blow your trinket cooldowns, especially if tanks don't have any defensive cooldowns up. That's usually when I prio burning my trinket. So for this fight in particular, for Brutalis, damage is extremely consistent. When the slashes are going out, the meteor slashes, and when stop is coming out. So it makes things very, very predictable. And that's when you can kind of cheat. So for example, if I'm shaman healing and stomp isn't out yet, and meteor slash still has another few seconds, I might cheat off that. If a burn target, like let's say Archviz was at 5 seconds, I might cheat off healing the raid if everyone's HP for the most part looks like what it is right now, and toss an extra heal on Archviz, who has 5 seconds left on burn, like with a lesser healing wave. That ensures that Archviz stays alive, and that ensures that and you're not hurting the raid by cheating off that, because there's no damage going out. Now, if Meteor Slash and Stomp were at 2 seconds, I would be pumping heals into the tank, whatever tank is about to get stomped. Right. So like in this case, see, we have 3 debuffs, a Meteor Slash coming. That means Smixy's gonna get is gonna taunt probably in a few seconds. So that means I'm gonna immediately start precasting onto Smixy. So it's being able to find those little moments of when you can kind of like cheat off your assignment to help the rest of the raid. If you're unsure of yourself, it's always better to stick with your role assignment. But I do encourage you to kind of look at where there are times in the fight where you can kind of not ignore your assignment, but where your assignment is irrelevant for like that point in time. KJ is another great example. So, for example, right? So KJ's Soul Flang on Sagi, but right before reflections come up, let's jump. So reflections are out. Right now, KJ is casting Shadow Spike. So that means I don't have to heal Sagi, right? That means Shamans don't have to chain off Sagi. Means Holy Paladins don't have to heal Sagi. This is our time to kind of like make our own adjustments and heal like whoever's important. So, as a shaman, if I see Fire Bloom on a bunch of close targets, I will prio chain healing those targets. As a priest, I just toss renews on them. As druids, I just toss rejuve on them, or life bloom, and then but yeah, it makes it a lot easier to know that in this specific circumstance, I don't need to be healing Sagi. So it's identifying moments in a fight where you can make your own adjustments, and like, let's say you're the raid tank, or you're the tank healer, you don't need to heal the tank healer here. On the flip side of the fight, like for example, both Tyrk and I are assigned to raid healing. Once Shadow Spike ends, I really hope I do it what I say I'm gonna do. Once Shadow Spike ends, we should be looking at rolling. Yeah, if you can see right here, I'm rolling a hot on Soggy. Right, Soggy is not my main target, but I'm rolling a renew on him. For both priests and druids, this becomes very important that there's always a hot rolling on the tank, because that's an indirect heal that keeps the tank topped off, and that's for those two classes. It's really important, because there will be gaps between direct heals from shamans and from paladins, right? Like it's you can't just sit there. There's that cast time, so like that's what helps fill the cast time, and helps support the tank as well as the rest of the raid. Yeah, going back to the UI stuff, I can see how much time's left on Fire Blooms. If you notice, every single one of my Fire Bloom targets has a renew on it. So just kind of keep that in mind for UI. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I got a question. So, what you're saying is that it's a good idea as a healer to have a very good knowledge, a deep knowledge of what the actual mechanics of the fight are.
Yeah, it becomes pretty important because it allows you to know when you can kind of flex throughout the raid. So I'll use Brutalis was a pretty good example of like one of those fights that we really struggled with early on in Senwell Plateau. Part of it was healing the burn target, like keeping the burn targets alive, right? The other part is healing through stomp. And so initially, like, it felt like a lot of our healers were kind of just sticking to our roles. But then as we kind of began to understand the fight better and better, you'll see people transition off what their traditional assignments are to kind of help out on the burns, to help out on the tanks when the stomp goes out. So like where I'm positioned in the group, both Mal and or actually Mal and Karn, they're normally to the left of where I am right now, and you'll notice that they're in group 2, so they're not a good circle of healing target. Because I know the fight, I know that meteor slash, there's a lot of time in between meteor slashes, so I can literally just toss a renew on both Mal and Karn for the duration of the time that Soggy is tanking Brutalis, while I can still cursive heal group 3, and then the group 4 people on my side, I can also just toss a renew on. So like I don't have to like sit there and waste the 1.5 seconds it takes to cast flash heal. I can just hit them with a one GCD renew, and they're good for like the next like 16 seconds or whatever the actual duration of renew is. They're pretty much good throughout the entire phase. And I don't have to worry about directly healing them. Duck doesn't have to worry about directly healing them. Turek doesn't have to worry about healing them. And then we can just all focus on when the stomp comes out or when the burn targets get low. And so that's kind of like where we would flex. But yeah, the more you know about the fight, the better it is. Which kind of goes into my next point too, is as a healer, you kind of want to find a spot where you literally do not have to move. That's obviously not the case for every fight. Brutalis is another prime example, because if you get burned, you need to kind of move to the burn zone. But the less you have to move, the better, because that means higher uptime on being able to cast heals. One of the very first things that a lot of people look at with healers is their active uptime, right? Active uptime is an indication of a few things. It means that how consistent are you healing, and it also means if on fights, if there's a lot of movement, like Supremus or Reliquary, or not Roz, Blood Boil, or even like Council. Like if you have like a high uptime, like 90 to 99%, the higher it is, means that you're probably making adjustments as a healer to maximize the amount of output you're doing. For druids, I mean, uptime realistically, barring mana issues, should be 99%, right? Because there's so many hots, that there should almost never be a reason why you're not healing. Paladins, on the other hand, have it much more rough, because the bulk of their healing will be done with a cast timer. Same thing with shamans. It's a little bit more difficult, just because outside of nature's swiftness, everything has a cast timer. But it's also making use of your movements, with other abilities. So, like for example, for shamans, if you're moving and your timer on your totems are low, and you're gonna have to move more than 1 GC, just refresh a totem, right, while you're moving, or reapply water shield if you're missing 2 ticks and you're gonna be moving for a whole GC. Reapply water shield. That way you don't have to do it later on. It doesn't interrupt your healing later on. You're doing something while you're moving, so you're making use of your time, so you don't have to do it later. For priests, it's throwing out palms or shields or renews while you're moving, or even circle of healing. But just making sure that you're optimizing all your time, so that you can continue to focus on healing. So again, like if you're moving and you have to do something else, what can you fit in that time slot? Can you toss down another totem? Can you pop drums? Can you toss up earth shield, water shield? All this as a shaman. If you're a priest, can you palm something and renew it? Shield it, circle of healing. Do you need to reapply a single target buff? Like for example, like if Malfac just got battle rest, that might be a good time for me to reapply power word fortitude on him. But yeah, just making sure that you're not wasting any time. So anything that you're doing, there is an action tied to it, especially while you're moving. And then yeah, just when you go into a fight, knowing what the fight is, and just making sure like where your position is, that's going to enable the most success. So if you're on something like, let's move forward. So right here, this is on Mother, a perfect example. I know Draenei can't fit under this fish, but I also know that if there's only like 3-4
They
people,
can.
okay, so I guess they can. I didn't know that, but
It's
Yeah.
it's on the sides. They can.
Yeah.
It's like on the very side. It's
yeah,
they definitely have a little bit more
yeah.
struggle
Yeah.
fitting in there than other classes. That's because they thick as fuck, boy.
But as a healer, I'll position myself underneath this leg right here, specifically for multiple reasons. One, fatal attraction is less likely to kind of put people into this corner, so that means I don't have to move as much. Especially if we get a bad fatal attraction. Like I think this past Thursday we got a fatal attraction on this rug, and I actually ended up scooting forward just to help reduce damage from the fatal attraction. But yeah, I put myself in this position over here on the right, so I don't have to worry about as much potential raid damage, taking as much potential raid damage. Because if we stacked everyone underneath the fish, all ranged underneath the fish, and a fatal attraction lands to the left of the fish, that's everyone taking damage. So I mean, that's also kind of dependent on what the raid leader wants to do. I mean, if the raid leader wants everyone under the fish, then you kind of, and they're not flexible about it. You kind of have to listen to that. But putting yourself in a good position so that I don't have to ever move. That means I can consistently heal both the range group and the melee group, and I don't have to worry about any kind of downtime. Let's see. Like another good fight would be Council. Let's see. So right now, as a healer, I would actually say my position is really bad. because I'm stuck in this whole group of people. Which means if a Flame Strike, Consecrate, or Blizzard were to land in that, all of us have to move. All of us are taking damage, and that's a whole lot of people to heal, and that's time that I'm not healing. I mean, again, I could put down new totems, or I could reapply Earth Shield or Water Shield or whatever. But this is a perfect example of like being in a bad area, and it does happen, right? Like, because Flame Strike could happen on a group, and then we all migrate to the right, and it kind of pushes us together. But if you notice over here, don't know who that is, but they're in pretty good position, right? The only downside for them is they might be ranging their healers a little bit, but just based upon my own raid frames, I can see that this person's still in range, and that's a good position because they don't have to move as much, and they're still able to heal everyone else. Lastly, as a healer, I think another big thing is the last, I guess, big thing is mana management. I see a lot of people going in with this mindset of, I'm going to be able to pump out all my big heals, and you don't have to pump out big heals to do well or to perform. You just need to be effective with your healing, and you need to prioritize your healing well and consistently heal. So
I have a question for you. Actually, two questions. So, what's your opinion? I say first, what's your opinion on overhealing?
I don't think overhealing is necessarily a bad thing. I think excessive overhealing does become kind of an issue, because that probably means that you're either late to the party, or you're probably not targeting someone correctly, like prioritizing someone correctly. Overhealing is going to happen, but like if you're a priest and you're sitting at 50% overhealing, that's a bit concerning, right? If you're a paladin sitting at 50% healing, I'm much less concerned about that. Same thing with the druid. If you're a druid and you're sitting at like 40-50% overhealing.
So would you say roughly like 30% overhealing is sort of
it's a normal number for it. I'd say 30 to 40, or maybe high 30s is normal for priests and shaman. It tends to be a little bit higher for paladins and druids, just because their healing gets sniped.
Okay. So do you think overhealing is if you were to like look at your own logs and try to self-diagnose it, do you think that overhealing may be a good indicator to look at if you find yourself like losing a lot of mana?
Yeah. So if you're sitting at a lot of overhealing and you're running out of mana, it's probably an indication of two things. It's probably an indication of you're using too high of a rank of healing. And it's probably an indication that you're healing people that are already being focused, or your reaction is too slow on that particular person.
So how would you go about fixing that if you find yourself like your reactions are too slow? Do you think that's something that can improve with positioning and with like knowledge of the fight?
Is, I think, where the biggest opportunity becomes. So if you're on, sorry, I'm gonna use Brutalis again because that's like the easiest fight to use. Like if you're on Brutalis, when the meteor slashes are coming out, so you can kind of time when your heal goes off, right? So if you know your chain heal, so like for example, my chain heal time is 2.16 seconds. That means like if I see a Brutalis meteor slash timer at like 2 seconds remaining, I should be focusing on chain healing off the main tank, the active main tank, because the moment that meteor slash goes off, I'm going to immediately top off the raid with heals. It means everyone gets topped off quicker. I probably won't overheal because my heal is gonna get there basically as soon as the damage goes out. Excuse me. But knowing the fight really helps kind of predict when the damage is going to go out. And then having the correct UI also will help, because if I know, let's see, let's go to twins. So right now, my UI tells me that Law, Face, Paul, I want to say that's Lorca, and Karn. No, that's Tiva. Tiva and Karn, they all have the fire debuff. That means they're going to continually take damage. So as a healer, if I'm on melee, then I can kind of target Face because he's missing a lot of HP, and I know he's going to consistently take damage. And I know Law is melee. It's going to kind of heal them both. And then anyone else who's free. So that will help reduce overhealing, but it's also a smarter heal because there's consistent incoming damage coming into both Face and Oprah Winfrey, right? Because that debuff is what, like 3 minutes long. So it's just an effective use of your skill. Or if I'm on raid heals, then I can focus Paul, Karn, for healing. Because again, they have the debuff, and I know the fight, and I know that the debuff adds damage over time, so then I can just focus on those. So to your point, Venera, knowing the fight does tremendously help on prioritizing targets, and helping ensure that your healing is a smart decision, and it helps reduce overhealing. Like I said, overhealing in itself isn't bad. Excessive overhealing is. And then yeah, if you find yourself with mana issues and a lot of overhealing, that means for the duration of TBC, you're using too high of a rank. It changes in Wrath of the Lich King. So basically in a week or two, you don't have to worry about ranks. But for now, if you find yourself with mana issues, make sure that you're down ranking. I see a lot of people going into fights using max rank Circle of Healing, max rank Chain Heal, max rank Flash Heal or Flashlight. You don't always have to use max rank. You can, find what different levels of down ranking works for you. As a shaman, I personally use 1, 3, and 5. As a priest, for Flash Heal, I use Flash Heal rank 4 and max rank. And then Circle Healing, I use 3 and 5. And then for Resto Druids, I use rank 1 regrowth and max rank, which I think is, want to say it's 12. Because there's a trick with Druids. If you use a max rank regrowth and then you use the lowest rank regrowth, even though that direct heal of regrowth is only rank 1, the dot itself gets refreshed and it still stays max rank. And that's how you can help extend mana efficiency while keeping HOTS on a person without having to expend too much mana. The other common issue I see with a lot of healers is they don't time their potions and dark runes at the correct times. Luckily for me, both my priest and shaman, if I pop a potion at 70% HP, if the potion crits, it brings me back up to like 96%. So I know right around 70% is when I want to pop my first potion, and then basically from there on out, I'm just popping them on cooldown. Dark rune, I can pop around high 70s, low, and then it'll put me back up if I need it. The other thing too, though, is if you're lucky enough to get a Shadow Priest, and if you're really lucky to get Archviz, someone like Archviz or Ali, who are like 90%, 99% batteries, that allows a lot more flexibility in kind of just putting out the max rank heal, just to kind of like ensure that yeah.
Here's a question real quick. When should you be dark runing and mana potting?
Well, Venera, I just answered that.
No. I mean, like, is there a specific percent
so,
you should be at?
Yeah. So
then
like
pop
I said,
it.
for me, it's on both my shaman and priest. It's around 70% for for mana pot, in case it crits, it brings me really close to 100%. And then Dark Rune is high 70%, low 80%. It's gonna vary per character because everyone's mana pool is a little bit different. So I believe the crit on a mana pot is around 3k. I mean, I can check it right now. Yeah, it's 3k.
3K.
So should you do it based off of like, okay, so let's say Holy Paladins, right? Because they have such a large mana pools. That popping a pot doesn't really do a lot. So, you know, should you plan to pop a pot at whatever percent value equates to what a crit would bring you back up to when you use it?
For Holy Paladin,
or should you just do it off of the
I do
average?
it off what the potential crit is. I don't do it off the average because
is it better to Dark Rune and then Mana Pot, or Mana Pot?
I prefer the Mana Pot over Dark Rune because Mana Pot gives more mana back. And Dark Rune, there are moments when you shouldn't Dark Rune. Like if big AoE damage is coming out, you shouldn't Dark Rune because I've definitely killed myself Dark Runing and then taking raid damage. So it's in my opinion, Mana Pot is safer. It gives more mana back if it crits even more. Especially since the cooldown on it is, the same as a Dark Rune. I prefer the Mana Pot because it gives me back more. There are also other tricks which I'll go into a little bit later on how to help weave in sustained mana from Paladins, but I'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, basically I Mana Pot, and then once I get back down to like 80%, if I know I need if I know I need mana on the fight, then I'll pop the Dark Rune. For my priest, I tend to gear heavy mana regen, so it's not really an issue for me anymore. Especially if I get in the Shadow Priest group, I can just kind of max rank everything and just use mana pots, and I don't even actually use Dark Runes anymore. For almost every fight. For my shaman, I actually still have to use both mana potions and Dark Runes. There are some people who prefer to use the potion that gives you both mana and health back, which is the rejuvenation potion, just because you're not losing out on that much mana, and but you're still gaining a lot of HP, so it's it can be good on fights where there's a lot of raid damage out, and it can help actually. Theoretically, you're helping saving mana because you're topping yourself off. So that means that's one less person that has to heal you. A lot of that comes down to personal preference. I've just always preferred the super mana potion over anything else, just because the way I value as a priest is I can toss a renew on myself, and that lasts me the 12 seconds. That's 12 seconds of healing, right? Versus the amount that's healed by a reju potion. Again, that comes down to personal preference. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong answer as far as which potion to use. I do think the more correct answer is to use a mana potion before a Dark Rune.
Yeah, and two, I think it kind of depends also on the fight. Like I strongly prefer the mana potions, but for some of them, where the whole raid takes a lot of damage, I will, kind of weave in that the rejuve potion, or sometimes I generally, like you, I don't really use the Dark Runes anymore because I don't need them. I prefer to use just the others, and it's nice to have that health stone cooldown available if I need it, instead of hey, I popped this Dark Rune and now I can't use my health stone. So, but that for me anyway will just kind of vary from fight to fight, depending on what's happening and what I will need. So, I mean, not the same thing every
that's
time.
A very good point, Norka. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
I have another question. So, a lot of different healers in the game have a lot of different ways that they can, or abilities within their toolkit that can help them, sustain mana, right? So priests have Shadow Fiend, paladins have Divine Illumination, shamans have Water Totem, those type of things.
is there a particular strategy for when exactly you should be using these cooldowns? Like, should you go, like, let's say for a paladin, would you do something like mana pot, then dark rune, and then divine illumination, or should you start off with divine illumination? And same thing with like a shadow. Well, I guess shadow priest is going to be a lot different because of their toolkit. But is there a point where you've used your pot, you've used your dark rune, and you're noticing like, I'm actually going through mana pretty quick. I should probably use my like shadow fiend here so that I can actually make it with enough in the tank to actually like hit my super mana pot and still keep going instead of because my opinion is that if you've waited till you're at like 30% mana before you've popped a super mana pot or something like that, you've already fucked up. You've already fucked up big time. And that's for a DPS or a healer. So is there a meta game involved with
There actually
healers
is.
like that where you have to sort of sustain your healing? And where do you put in those sustainabilities? And I think for shamans it's kind of more part of it is also giving it to your mage, so it's not necessarily using it for yourself.
So yeah, actually, that's actually a really good point. There is a metagame to it. So, depending for shaman specifically, if you're in the mage group, you might want to coordinate with the mages a little bit about when you're dropping mana tide totem. Um, I usually don't get put in the mage group. I usually get put in the healer group. So for me, I generally drop it at approximately 60% mana, and I actually drop my mana tide totem on longer fights. I drop that first before I drop mana potions. The reason being is on a longer fight, so any fight that's basically like 6 minutes or longer, that means I have a second opportunity to drop mana tide totem. Same thing with priest and shadow fiend. If it's a longer fight, I will use my shadow fiend first, because I know that I'll have a second opportunity to use the shadow fiend in a fight. So, for example, in KJ, right, that used to be like an 8-minute fight. So that meant like 1 minute into the fight, I was popping my shadow fiend. And this is before we used to do the stack strat. So I'd pop my shadow fiend 1 minute into fight. I would actually be kind of wasting the shadow fiend to a certain extent, because I think the last hit of the shadow fiend would I would already be at full mana, but then I would consistently be healing, and then I would pop my mana potion at 70%, which is just under minus 3,000 healing. And then at 78%, I'd be popping my dark rune. Then my mana potion would come back up. Then my dark rune would come back up, and then like the last 10% of KJ's health, I would have shadow fiend back up, and that was kind of the only way that I was able to sustain mana, is because I knew that fight was so long that I would pop my shadow fiend that early. It would be the same thing for shamans with the mana tide totem. Same thing for druids, if druids are keeping the innervate for themselves because they can't afford to give it to a mage. I don't remember how divine illumination works on a paladin because I haven't played one since Wrath, so I can't answer that question specifically.
Lorca, when do you use your divine illumination?
I use it on my first heal cast, and I use my first mana potion as soon as my mana is, low enough to make it be effective. So, if I immediately divine illumination and then maybe 20 seconds later I'm hitting a mana pot, if it looks like it's going to be a messy fight and we're going to keep going and a couple DPS are down or something, then maybe I'll hit a dark rune, and so so I've got this like 1 minute 45-second timer where I'm not only slowly using my mana because I'm gaining it back so early on, but also very frequently I have something else that I can use to give myself mana back. And then I'm not at the end of the fight totally gassed out and straining for 100 mana to heal somebody. So
So you have it bound in with some heal.
Yeah, I have it macroed to my holy shock for like emergencies, you know, but pretty typically I will just, you know, cast it and then we start the fight. But
Okay. And do you save your divine favor for like specific uses, or do you just have it on CD bound into something else?
a little of both depending on the fight. But same thing, pretty
Okay.
typically I want to use it, you know, as soon as
As soon as it's
possible.
up.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's see. There's something else I was gonna ask. There's a second question. So we've kind of gone over a little bit of like mana management consumes. When it comes to healing a target that you know is going to take a lot of damage, so Brutalis is a good example of this. Hits the tanks heavy, sometimes infrequently, sometimes not. As healers who are doing a lot of tank healing, are you using a swing timer from the boss to try to time up your heals to when the hits land, or are you constantly healing and then canceling the cast at the last second if a hit hasn't gone through?
For
and are you downranking until a bigger hit goes through and then immediately like doing
it kind of
something
depends
larger?
on how my mana sustain is. So like when we were starting on Brutalis, when mana was more of an issue, I would downrank flash heals leading into Stomp on the tank. And the reason why I don't cast Greater Heal is because we have both Pallies and Shamans also focusing on the tanks. And so in that circumstance, it becomes more important that there's a consistent amount of healing going into the tanks versus like trying to get off one big heal and hoping that it tops off the tank. Right? You want a more consistent streamline of like if the double slash goes out, that you're healing in between that like 0.1 second, and that the tank is still consistently getting heals, especially like when Stomp goes out. Right? And then if I know Stomp is coming in, that's when I would switch from a low rank heal to low rank flash heal to a max rank flash heal, because I know that the tank can't dodge, can't parry, can't block, right? So that means that they're gonna need the full force of heal. And again, for me, at least in my own personal opinion, it is more important that there is a consistent bombardment of healing than necessarily like a 2.5 second big heal, right? Because again, you have at that point in time, you probably have 2 to 3 shamans chain healing off the tank. You have 2 paladins healing the tank, and then on top of that, like as a priest, it's more important for me to make sure that I'm trying to help fill the gaps in between the healing, because I don't necessarily know exactly when the damage is going to go off. Right, Stomp isn't necessarily an exact timer. It could be delayed. Same thing with corrosion, right? Corrosion on Felmus isn't like necessarily an exact timer. So it's more important that we're filling the gaps in case a big hit does go out, versus like just trying to pull off one big heal.
Okay, so that's the perspective from like a priest, right? So what about as a shaman or a paladin healer? Are you also downranking right before it and then readjusting, or are you staying with like a
That
steady
also
rank the
depends on
entire
if I
time?
have a shadow priest as a shaman. If I have a shadow priest, then I generally am just max ranking it just to not risk anything. I don't care too much about overhealing, especially like when Stomp is going out. Just because I'm more focused in keeping the tank alive than anything else. So I'll max rank it. If I don't have a Shadow Priest, then I will use rank 3 leading up to the Stomp, and around the time when Stomp is about to go out. Like if I see that timer, and like I said, my chain heal is about almost 2 seconds. So if I see just about 2 seconds off on the Stomp, I might switch from chain heal 3 to chain heal 5. Lorca, I don't know if you want to speak necessarily to the paladin aspect of it. But...
Um, yeah, I could. I personally I don't downrank anything, but that's definitely I just don't find a need to based on my mana usage, I guess. Um, I'm not using like a swing timer or anything, but I will kind of, I guess, observe what's happening in the raid at that time, and is there a lot of raid healing happening? Do I need, can I weave in some flash lights instead of just dumping holy lights in there? Um, but I'm not concerned at all with overhealing unless for some reason, not for some reason because we're so good, but if no one else is taking damage and everybody is able to heal the tank, then I will kind of adjust my heals because it doesn't need to be, holy light all the time, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So you're never downranking flashes or holy lights,
No.
just because you already have so much crit and sustain that it's not really necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I think I've got like 25% crit and then 28% on I think holy light. But yeah, I mean if I was having mana issues, I would not be
I'm in a
doing
similar
that.
boat, so I know I'm only half a healer here. But even I don't downrank because with enough mana pots and just I mostly do Flash of Light anyway. I don't really have the mana to do Holy Lights, but I do Holy Lights when we switch tank targets. Like if they say, okay, switching in 3, I'll pre-cast a Holy Light on that other tank target. I'll also do a Holy Light pre-cast when Stomp is about to go out. But other than that, I just spam max rank Flash of Light.
Okay. I see Ducks in here. Duck, what do you do as probably the most seasoned shaman healer? Do you do what Inflate was saying, or is it a different scenario because you're usually in the Shadow Priest
Yeah,
group?
I'm in. I'm in the Shadow Priest group, so it's just max rank chain heal on the tank. That's literally it. It doesn't matter if there's no sure damage going out. I complete my cast every time just for the off chance that damage does come in. Because since I'm in the Shadow Priest, I have the flexibility and mana to be able to do those risky heals.
Okay. And so, do any of the tank reps in here, nobody uses like a melee timer, like a melee swing timer that shows like what the boss is hitting?
I mean, I have mine active all the time, but there's too much going on
Just get
to really
advantage
pay
of the
attention.
swings.
The Legion will fall.
That and they dodge too much for it to be reliable. So I mostly just cancel cast if there's nothing to be healed.
Okay. Inflate, did you say that you ever cancel cast, or do you just let the heal
I
go?
wouldn't say I don't ever cancel cast, but it's very rare that I cancel cast. A lot of that is just due to second nature of like knowing when to heal. I used to cancel cast a lot when I first started healing back in like original vanilla. But and I used to even have like a stop cast macro, but yeah, I haven't used one since like BWL.
Okay. Okay.
Again, that's not to say I don't, because there are times I do. It's just it's like when I know I'm late to the healing party, then I'll cancel cast. Like if I see someone get super low, and then I see like on my UI that this person's getting healed, like I see like the what's it the healing indicator, incoming healing indicator, go from like this tiny little bar to like immediately like fill up, then I know that that person's probably getting targeted by 2 to 3 people. So in that case, I'll just swap off. And that's like the one of the few times I'll cancel cast, but especially as a priest, as a priest, it's very rare because there's not many people who are gonna out heal me, um, in speed. But as shaman, I might do a little bit more just because my chain heal takes a little bit longer to heal.
Okay, interesting.
I would agree with that as well. I usually let stuff go through on my priest because I'm normally doing my flash spam, and on my shaman, since I'm doing chain more often, I'll usually cancel it if I see a lot of incoming healing going out.
Any other questions before we wrap this up and head off to ZA?
Can you go over a overview of what you think sort of the most important things are for healers? Like in terms of if someone was looking to get into healing and to do well at it, like beyond just gearing, like talk about what are the more intangible things that you should understand about how a healer plays in order to
I
do
think
well at it?
one of the things is treating your raid frames like a rearview mirror in your car, more than like just staring at it. So like basically, like when when you're driving, you're supposed to check your mirrors, right? Like every 3 to 5 seconds. That's like kind of the same concept of like when you're healing. Like even if you're looking at your raid frames, like every 3 to 5 seconds, make sure you're taking your eyes off the raid frame to see like where you are. That becomes pretty important. That way you don't tunnel vision and kill yourself. So that's probably one of the I would say first things to kind of get used to, because a lot of healers get used to just staring at raid frames and then they never kind of like break that habit. So if you kind of implement the habit from the get go, it makes it a lot easier. UI, making sure that your UI is giving you the information you need. It doesn't matter if you use Voodoo or Xpearl or Grid or Click or whatever. Just make sure that you use the UI that's comfortable for you, that's giving you the information that you need. And then lastly, I am a big advocate of mouse over versus click target healing, just because it removes like that half a second it takes to click something and then heal them. Those are like my three, I guess, big things.
Okay. Actually, I do have one more question regarding that. So you've talked about UI, right? Have you talked at all about maybe keybinds?
I didn't actually. That's a good point. So there are a few different ways to do keybinds. And I wouldn't say with keybinds, I would say that's more of a comfortability issue. Um, I would say I'm probably on the more unconventional side because I use, like, if you guys are, I can share my screen. So if you guys can see my WoW screen, if you notice, I use 1, 2, 3, 4, and then R, C, Q, E, Z, X, tilde, and G. And then I have a control version of them all. And then I also use my shift keys to swap between different panels. For like really rarely used spells, but that all exists there. Um,
Now, why
so
those
for
keys
me,
specifically?
if you'll notice, I don't have, by default A and D is turn. I use my mouse to do that. I don't use A and D to turn, and then Q and E. That frees them up for binding. So for me, R, C, Q, E, Z, X, tilde, and G. Those are all like pretty much in a centralized location. I mean, I could theoretically use F, but I use F for focus, just because F stands for focus, I guess. But everything is.
Oh wait, that actually, as a side note to that, when you are healing, should
I
you
don't.
always
No,
have
I
a
don't always have
focused
a focus
target
target
up?
up. It,
And if you were to do a focus
mm,
target, how would you determine what you should actually be focus targeting? Or does it depend on what your
some of it's
assignment is?
assignment, and some of it is the fight. I'm trying to think of a fight that I used the focus target on. I can't think of a particular fight that I use the focus target on for healing. No, I don't even use it for council.
I was gonna say, I don't know if this sounds weird or not, but generally, I don't use focus target as much in TBC, but I still do it. But I actually focus target the boss, so I know where he's at. Because I have no idea what my actual target is, because basically everything I do is mouse over. So it's like I'll have a critter targeted sometimes. I mean, no, there's no critters in raids, but it's like that's just a random example. Like I'll have anything targeted and it won't make any sense. So it's like I'll like to focus target the boss, so his health is always there and I can see it.
Okay. So, anyways, back to keybinds.
So yeah, for me, I like everything near my movement buttons. So that's why it's Q E Z X tilde G, and then I do a control for everything, so it kind of creates more availability. Yeah. You
use control
so like,
modifiers.
If you see on my warlock, control 2 is cursive agony, control 3 is elements, and 4 is reckness. Control R is corruption, but then like over here 2 is my trinket, 3 is my shadow bolt. I would say that for me, I probably use 1, 2, 3, 4, and then control 1, 2, 3, 4 as things that I'm most likely to use, both as a healer and like any other class I play. Those tend to be the ones that are like, hey, these are the buttons I use the most, just because they're so close to WASD. And then same thing with Q and E tend to be pretty consistent for me. In fact, Q for me on most characters is whatever an interrupt is. So like mage, it's counterspell. For shamans, it's earth shock. That's generally what Q tends to be. E tends to be a little bit more random. So for like me on my priest, E is power word shield because it's pretty accessibly easy as an oh shit button. And then on my shaman, E is my water shield just because, you want to keep it up as it gets knocked off.
So you try to keep certain abilities, or I guess the theme of certain abilities, sort of the same across characters.
That's kind of more of a trying to think what it is, like a type A kind of a thing, is I try to keep it as consistent as possible across all characters. But yeah.
And do you use any like mouse keybinds?
I don't, because I only have a 5-key mouse, so I don't use mouse keybinds. I was thinking about using mouse 4 for bop on a paladin, but my paladin is currently at level 1, so I'm waiting for the character boost. But yeah, I've never been one to use a mouse for bindings. I don't know why. It doesn't matter for me personally in any game. I've like, even when there's like, like mouse 5 I think tends to be like quick attack in like a lot of shooters, and 4 tends to be like grenades. But I never used them. I don't know why. Like if I quick attack in other shooters, I use the key binding versus the mouse binding.
Okay.
I find that with mice, sometimes using the buttons kind of changes where the mouse is, so it can be a little bit less precise. That's why I like keyboard.
I think Tiva does with Voodoo. She does like a bunch of different like combinations, like if it's control left click versus shift left click versus alt left click. But
yeah, for a priest, I use shift and control because there's a shit ton of buttons to use. It's always an option.
Cool. Well, that all sounds good to me.
I was gonna say I use I have 12 buttons and my mouse has a modifier key, so I have 24 buttons on my thumb, and I use that. But I will agree that if I'm getting a little crazy or aggressive or oh shit moments, occasionally I'll click a little bit hard and move my mouse more than I intended to. Doesn't happen very often, but does happen.
Yeah, for me, it's really hard to do like control plus any other key on the keyboard just because my hands are small and I usually fat finger something. I always mess it up. So for me, I rely heavily on my mouse. I do shift modifiers with my mouse because they're separate hands. So it's a lot easier for me to not mess anything up. I have like a simple Logitech mouse that has 2 buttons on the side, so I utilize those and the mouse wheel up in like the scroll function and using the mouse wheel button itself. I rely on those for my most important spells, and especially with Voodoo too.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's exactly like the small hand thing. I've got a bunch of stuff bound to the mouse, but I don't really like using my keybinds that much.
All right. Any other questions?
Okay.
We're missing our healer. All right, I'm gonna stop recording and I'll post it later on for people that want to watch it.